What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. We have the one and only Paul on today. How you doing, Paul?
Hey, how's it going, Devin?
Wonderful, thank you. Uh,
Good.
so today we thought it'd be fun to talk about some Neptune hacks, customizations, maybe unconventional uses, you know, different funky stuff you could do. I figured it'd be a fun little rabbit hole for today. So if you guys got any questions in the chat, as always, let us know as you go. Otherwise, we will see what kind of random rabbit holes we end up on. How's life, Paul? It's been a little while since I've had you on.
Life is good, man. Life is really good. I think this is the first one I've been on this year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
I was on a roll at the end of last year, or before Christmas time. You know, once you get past Thanksgiving, everything just sort of blurs together, right?
Yep.
But I was on a roll for getting back on this stream quite a bit. And then I just got really busy with work and all. So thank you for being patient with me, Devin, as I have been missing this for a little bit, but been good. Been good.
That's
You?
good. Yeah, life has been crazy as always. It never ends.
Yeah.
I've been, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's good. It's good to get back into the swing of things again.
Have you been you've been doing the streams pretty regularly though, or have you
Yep.
been taking? Yeah, I thought
Nah,
so.
it's been pretty much every week. I think I took like one off for Valentine's Day or the odd random thing or wife's birthday or
hmm
something, but
hmm
pretty much every week, which is good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Excellent. Good to have you. Okay. I'm just gonna start making a little list of questions as they pop up.
Yeah,
Island
this is
Reef.
we encourage pictures, questions today. Help direct us what you guys want to talk about.
Yep.
Devin and I have a few things that I'm sure we'll go through, and cool things that to do with your Apex. You know, in terms of unlocking things you probably haven't
Yep.
really messed with. But please ask questions to help direct us what you want to talk about.
It sounds good. Blue Basin Aquatics. Can we change the time from military time? Can you change it to 12-hour time?
You can have a 12 and 24-hour clock.
Hmm.
That is a feature that is available in Fusion for for A2s and A3s.
Okay.
Okay, and you have a 12 or 24-hour clock. I do strongly suggest, though, in your personal business and everyday life, though, to switch to a 24-hour clock. It is much less ambiguous. For example, if I were to say 7 o'clock, Devin, what does that mean? Are we talking about 7 in the morning? Are we talking about 7 at night? You know, we don't know. But if I were to say
Yep.
1900,
Yeah.
you
It's
know
7 p.m.
exactly what I'm talking about.
You
So
know, it's reasonable logic.
just add 12 hours. That's all you got to do. Once it's in
Or
the
or
afternoon.
-2. So if it's 19 to -2, it's 7. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my quick math for it.
Oh,
All right.
I've never even made it work that way. I've always, I
It
always.
works once you hit 13 or higher.
Then I switched to a 24-hour clock when I was hired by Neptune Systems.
Really?
Yes, that's a true story. When I was just trying to do like all my coding things in customer service, like I'd always like get stuck, and so then I just switched all my stuff to 24-hour time,
It
and I
works.
realized, and I found the light, as they would.
That's awesome.
So
The biggest
you'll
thing,
be a much happier person. My wife, though, I always have to translate for her.
yeah.
So yeah.
The
So
big thing for me is always like time zones. I always include the time zone now because I talk to people from all over the place constantly.
yeah,
So,
we almost had the time zone thing work this year.
uh,
It was so close, but there were a couple of our international friends. The time zones still time caught them.
nice.
So these time zones are a complicated beast.
They get you. They get you. Okay, one arm reefer. How many skies for a 6x3x2 and a 9x3x3?
6x3x2, SPS or LPS or mixed reef.
Very good question.
So if it was an SPS tank, I would probably do 3 on a 6-foot tank.
Hmm.
And given the depth of that tank, so 3 feet, I
Yep.
would mount them not horizontally, but I'd mount them vertically,
Okay.
right? And I'd
Good
go
enough front
down
to
that
back.
way. And then same thing for the 9x3, but I'd do 4.
Yep.
Now, if you are a crazy stickhead, you might want to go to 5 on the 9x3. But I probably wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
So on
I,
the 9x3 too, probably don't mount right in the middle. Probably just bring them forward just maybe 6 inches,
yep.
right? Because you're not going to have a lot of activity in the back of your tank. you'll have far more activity in the front of your tank, whereas where you're going to probably want a bit more light.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. What's going on, Mike? Island Reef. Need advice setting up an adaptive reef toggle and example water change buttons. So
Well,
first
this
question, what are you using for pumps?
yes.
We need more details for this one. Now I love little custom buttons. I've built my own. I mean,
Hmm.
similar concept to adaptive reef. Do I don't know if you can see it for now. Let's try this. So if you go to 45, okay. So you can see right there, all those little buttons are all like custom ones that I've made on mine.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, so all kinds of stuff. Okay, so with an Apex dose, personally, I would probably just schedule a daily automated water change. But Paul, if someone wanted to have a push button water change for the dose, would you use a virtual
So
outlet and say turn it on for a certain thing, or how would you do it?
So how I would do this was I would go to task, okay, and I would get the manual water change first set up in the task, okay. The
Yep.
task utilizes the feed cycle, all right, and so it does initiate a feed cycle in order to create these things, and it does it in a very interesting way. But what it essentially does is it activates that through a virtual outlet instead of a feed cycle activating that virtual outlet. I would replace that with the switch input. So, like the adaptive reef instructions say, when you plug that directly into your Apex, that's if SW1, SW2, closed, open. So
Mm-hmm.
you just going to replace that feed cycle with with the switch thing. The other important part of this is how long do you want that to be active for, right?
Yep.
The way that the dose manual feed thing works is the feed cycle kind of determines the time that it occurs. So you would also want to add the time that you would want that to be on for. So for example, if that is a 60-minute situation, you would add a min time 60 minutes then on also in that virtual outlet.
Okay. I'll do a quick thing with this one. So on mine, these are my buttons, and I created virtual outlets for each of the buttons.
Hmm.
So for instance, a feed mode button. And what I did with that one, so when you push the physical button, it turns, so it says if the button's closed, so aka if it's contacted, then it turns it on. And then I say defer 45 minutes, then off. So that means it stays on for 45 minutes, then turns off. So you
So
could do,
go ahead. And I was just going to say, I use min time, right?
okay.
Basically, so what Devin is doing here is he is saying, the off statement needs to be true for 45 seconds before the off statement actually triggers, right?
Mhm.
Whereas min time says this is the minimum time that the on or off cycle must be true, right? So if he wanted to change that to a min time situation, he would just say min time 45 minutes then on, right? And
Yep.
that would be exact. He would change it to an on statement there,
Okay.
and that would do the exact same thing.
Yep. Okay. So same thing.
Yep.
Okay. Min time 45, then on. Okay. So that's one way to do it for sure.
Hmm.
Do I do any other weird ones on here? Yeah, it looks like I did defer for all mine.
Yeah. It both ways work. It's
Okay.
tomato, tomato. They do have different applications, right? Typically, the min time would be used for something that's momentarily
Mm-hmm.
going to occur, right?
Yeah.
Whereas defer is something that is continually going to occur.
Okay.
In Devin's examples, because he referred to an off statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is continually going to occur. Whereas I focused on the on statement, which is just a momentary occurrence. If
Okay.
that makes sense to people.
Yeah. So yeah, how I was doing it. So my virtual outlet basically watches the button, and if it sees that it's closed, aka pushed, then it turns on that virtual outlet until I tell it turn off again. So yeah, I don't know, different ways to do it, but either one of those will definitely work.
Hmm. The important part here is there is a task that takes care of all of the timings and when you want it to occur and all those things. If you could just run over to the task list for me, Devin. There it is. Yes. And then go to dose manual water change, right?
Oh,
So
that's easy.
you just configure everything you need there. There's no programming required or configuration required. You're upping the ante by adding this. I want it to happen by a push button. You could have that. We use a feed cycle for that instead.
Yep.
Push button is just fine. Just means you're going to have to do just a little bit more to make that happen.
Yep. Perfect. Nice and easy.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the ATK code and it would still dose if my ATK sensor is closed. So yeah, generally, like with my ATK, for example, I tend to set stuff based on sensors. Like you should be able to tell it off for that. Where's my ATK pump? If I can find
Hidden.
it.
Call it something else.
I'm pretty sure it's ATK pump. There it is.
There it
ATO
is.
pump. That's why.
Yep.
Nope, that's not the right one. Oop, water box. ATO pump. So anyways, I will generally turn stuff on and off based on the level switches. That's not a good
Yes.
example. I must have
All,
renamed it.
always control your ATK based on the level of those switches. Don't control it based on pH or any of those sorts of things. Likely what you're trying to do though is that when you want to top off with alkalinity instead of so kalkwasser instead of topping off with normal fresh water, that's what you want. So to do that, in the bottom of your kalkwasser, right, you only want that to occur if the pH is above a certain value, right? So let's say if pH is, or alkalinity for that example, for that matter, I'd probably use pH if it were me. So if pH is less than 8.2, then off on the bottom of that kalkwasser, right? And then at the bottom of the ATK, if pH is greater than 8.21, then off.
Yep.
Right. So basically, in one set of circumstances, the kalkwasser is going to run, pH being low, and then in another set of circumstances, the ATO with fresh water is going to run when pH is above a certain value.
Nice, you saw the way to do it. Yeah, Island Reef, what code could I put in with an Apex dose to dose kalkwasser but turn off elk if ATK sensor is closed? Yeah, so if you want to turn off something being dosed with your dose, same thing. If you go into code from here, you can go into little gear and go in advanced and just say if ATO high is closed, then off. Now, if my ATO, then off.
It's going to be if ATO closed, no equal there. Yep.
No.
If
Okay.
ATO closed,
Yeah.
then off.
Yeah. So, for example, now assuming this was your calc head that was dosing, once you've hit that max level in your sump, it would stop dosing, and that's just going into your dosing head, and then the gear, and then the advanced.
And I do want to comment, Reefing with Oak also commented, you have to be very cautious with this pH thing, okay? It is very possible that you could be dumping in large amounts of calc, right? And your pH is only going to be reflected minutes or hours later of going up or down, right? So generally speaking, it is much better just to have the calc that you want to add in and make sure that's diluted enough where it's basically all you ever are adding is calc, but it's such a diluted solution that it shouldn't push you over, even if that whole container were to dump in. Generally speaking too, and I've kind of I've described this to Devin as well, you have this foundational level, right, with your additives or a calcium reactor, and that should take care of 90% of your alkalinity and calcium needs, okay? Then if you have something else like kalkwasser, or you have a calcium reactor with a doser or something like that, that should take care of the extra flex, right? Which is where the Trident can really come in, right? And flex that up or down should it be required, So it basically just kind of is that turbo mode, so to speak, getting there. But your main sort of alkalinity calcium can largely be driven by your foundational, whatever you're doing, whether it be calcium reactor or additive dosing.
Yep. Okay. So I know you were talking about some of the cautions about, dosing based off pH and dosing different things. When I'm coding stuff, I always try and build in redundancies. So
Yes.
I have code here that refills my ATO container. Now there is one of the marriage saver things hooked up to an RODI, so it has its own optical sensor as well to turn it off. But I also have code in here, so I have multiple levels, and I have a float valve. So there's a liquid level sensor in there, and basically, if it's above a certain point, turn off. If it's below a certain point, turn on. Um, I also have a thing in here, so if it runs more than 120 minutes, then turn off, so it doesn't run too long. On top of that, min time 5 minutes, then off. So there's multiple levels here, right? So it doesn't flip on and off right away. If it's been on too long, turn off. If it's above a certain level, then turn off. One thing that I also added in as well with the liquid level sensor, if it equals 0.0, then off. Just because when I was testing it, if you unplug that cable, then it could read 0, right? So you don't want to have a situation where you accidentally, a cable gets unplugged and it doesn't turn off. So
Yeah,
it's all these things I've added as kind of a redundancy
and,
steps.
and that was a really smart use of the programming syntax when too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You generally know that your ATO pump should only run X amount of time,
Yeah.
right? Add an additional 5 minutes to that, or a 50% to that, right? And you know that if it ever runs longer than that, you don't want to put water on the floor. That is something that's generally frowned upon, right?
Wise.
So, and you can also make it so that your email alarm, right, if that when statement is ever triggered, your email alarm can also send you an alert based on that using the if error statement.
Yep.
So when a when has been triggered, WHEN, not WIN, right? But WHEN has been
Yep.
triggered. You can get an email alarm based on that as well using the if error statement.
Yep. Okay, Thomas Brown. With the ATO pump, do you have to use the AC plug or can you use the 2-pin connection on the side of the energy bar? You sure can. Those are like bonus outlets. 100% use them.
Yeah.
Yep. I have actually, I use them for the solenoids and the P pumps on mine. Same thing. It just saves you outlets, right? So it's a very wise way to go.
Yeah, I those 24-volt outlets have so many uses. I think Devin has a couple of different examples that he wants to show us
Yep.
today. But they're if you're tight on outlets, there's no reason not to use that. The outlets are always nice if you have extras. Why? Because they have power monitoring.
Mhm.
So when something should be consuming power, you can confirm that it is using power, and get an alert if it's not using power, or if it's using power when it shouldn't be, yada, 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 right? So those things are always nice if you have the extra outlets. If you don't, though, those DC 24-volt outputs are a lifesaver.
Now, so yeah, so I use them for the solenoids and the ATK pumps. Like obviously those are the ones that are made for it. I've also ran my own stuff off of it. Like I have one that runs a 24-volt LED strip. So if my tank is in alarm mode, then it visually casts a red glow on the roof of my tank. So I have a visual being like, okay, there's an issue with the tank. You need to look at something.
Mhm.
So that's like a good visual indicator, and that's something that I really liked. I found that's very useful. I've also used them to run 24-volt fans, or then you could use that to cool your tank. So if your tank's running too hot, you can cool it down. I believe, what are they, 30 watts that they can handle, or
You
how
can
many
do
watts do they
30,
go?
exactly. You can do up to 30-watt on those 24-volt, which is actually not, which is actually quite a bit, for 24 volts.
Yep,
Definitely can't drive a return pump on that, but you can get those low wattage devices on there, no problem.
exactly. Yeah, like 24-volt LED strip, super easy to wire up. I mean, very easy way to do it. So there's lots of cool stuff you can utilize these extra ports for, and save an outlet if you're running short.
Yeah, the Grow is a great example of a device that we decided to utilize for refugium growth.
Mhm.
Water resistant, and mounts very nicely to that. And we don't even include a power supply in there, right? Because the intention is just to use that 24-volt port.
Yep.
Sorry, shameless plug. Can't help myself.
No, that's all good. What do you thanks for the $2 super chat? Ask him when the Trident will test NO3 PO4. I figured that would come eventually. I don't think the Trident will, but maybe a new product will one day. Who knows?
Who knows? Like I said, I've been very busy, folks. So maybe that's one of the things that I've been very busy with. in the product development game. I would love to be able to test nitrates and phosphates. I know our customers would love to be able to test nitrates and phosphates.
Mhm.
Devin, would you love to be able to test nitrates
Oh,
and
of course I
phosphates?
would.
Yeah. Do you have any nitrate phosphate testers right now?
Yes.
What do you use right now?
I have a Mastertronic and I have a ReefBot.
Okay, okay. But I mean, those are like you test those kind of ab lib, right? Like, oh, I want to know what this is, or is that something that always goes for
Yeah, I have scheduled to do like weekly tests,
you?
but I would
Hmm.
love to have, test up on my Fusion dashboard with the rest of my results.
Yes, I totally agree with
Yep.
that. So, who knows? Maybe soon.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm just talking and nothing's coming up, but we'll see.
Oh, Rob B just had an excellent point too. If that's actually a not bad idea for hacking some extra outlets, use a 24-volt DC relay on additional outlets as an accessory port. So you could use it to trigger a 24-volt relay and then power whatever you
Yeah.
wanted off the relay. That's a good call,
So
actually.
I actually did was recommending some things for one of our more industrial size clients, and they needed these trigger ports, right? And they could use 110-volt triggers, but those 24-volt triggers were really nice. So they had 240-volt devices, right?
Yep.
That were getting supplied the mains from their normal 240-volt line, and that
Mhm.
24-volt trigger would then turn it on or off based on those DC ports, right?
That's a
So
great idea.
basically just completes the circuit.
Yep.
If you're not also, terribly electrically inclined, that's okay. In the grow industry, right? So
Mhm.
for hydroponics and things like that, they use these 240-volt, 110-volt triggers all the time.
Yep.
Because it's 240-volt timers, and the things that they kind of want to do with those can be difficult. So the Apex fits in very nicely as something that is, a integrated timer for them, but they need 240-volt control for that,
Yep.
and those triggers work very nicely for that.
Ah, very cool. Woody, Rob, oh yeah. So Rob's saying he uses those and 24-volt relays to trigger a relay to power a device, and Rob's using them for 600-watt heaters. So I mean, that's a
Yes.
great use.
600-watt heaters, anything basically. I mean, the Apex could handle a 600-watt heater. My usual recommendation is, well, why not just get three 300-watt heaters or something like that.
Mhm.
Spread the love out a little bit rather than put them into a single workhorse like that, or a 1,000-watt heater. I
Yep.
never understood 1,000-watt heaters in most of our home aquariums. Some aquariums need it, but not a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, I'm always a fan of two smaller heaters over one bigger heater from the redundancy
Mhm.
standpoint.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. Okay. I'm gonna ask Paul this one with a caveat. I get asked a lot of time how you change the Trident testing schedule, but I mean,
Oh,
there's some caveats here.
you want to hack that? We're going there.
We're going there. I get asked this question constantly, so I feel like I need to.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead.
caveat list. What are the risks or dangers or considerations?
Yeah, so I think this might be the actual first time I've ever commented officially on something like
Yep.
this. So I will caution folks that we spent a lot of time wanting to give the best experience for our customers, right? Particularly, what is the goal of the Trident? To deliver a precise and accurate measurement. Okay,
Mhm.
so if that is one of the main premises there, precise and accurate, then what are the requirements for that? Well, we found that when a reagent sat in the Trident for an extended period of time, we would lose considerable precision. Okay. Accuracy would, when you lose precision, accuracy kind of falls as well. You can have precision, but not accuracy. That's not a problem. But you would
Mhm.
particularly lose precision in those situations. So, and we tried this, on every other day. We tried this at once a day. We tried this, once a week, even, right?
Mhm.
And as that time and the reagent sort of sat in those lines and aged, right, precision just fell, and fell. The other thing to really be aware of in the Trident is, people say, well, A is for alkalinity, B is for calcium, magnesium, C is for calcium, magnesium. Okay. Yes, that is technically what all of those things are for. But the other very important thing here is that all of those reagents work together to keep
Mhm.
your Trident running very well. So if you just decide to drop one of those things, okay, so let's say, for example, I don't need to measure calcium, magnesium, thank you very much. I only want to measure alkalinity. Okay, you can do that. But what will happen? Well, in that situation, the alkalinity, particularly, is very acidic. Okay, and it
Mhm.
also stains very quite a bit. So what will happen for you is your cuvette will get dirty much faster. Okay, if conversely you only were to measure B and C, guess what? That'll do exactly the same thing. One of those, A is acidic, B and C are more basic,
Like kind of
right?
balance each other
And
out.
so guess what they do? They actually keep the machine running
Mm.
in tip-top shape, right?
Yep.
So expect there to be, more maintenance issues when you do those sorts of things. Expect to have less precise results.
Mhm.
And honestly, the reagent doesn't really last that much longer than the 2 months that it's designed to last when you open it up. So yeah, you may get 3 or 4 months, but the reagent and the effectiveness of that reagent is not what it was
Yep.
when you crack the seal.
So ideally, they have a stock. My original driver was my wife complaining about auto testers going off in the middle of the night. That was my
Mm-hmm.
original
Mm-hmm.
motivation.
Yeah.
Just because you're the at like 6 in the morning, waking up baby or her. Anyways, that was my original motivation. And I've been asked this like 100 times, and I haven't actually talked about it yet. So I figured it'd be a kind of a fun one to
Yeah, you feel,
dive
feel
into.
so with the caveat of do at your own risk,
Hmm.
right? And that the Trident is not designed to run this way and
Yeah.
possibly expect issues.
Yeah.
Devin, please tell us how to edit the schedule.
All right, I'll show you how to do this. So you need to know what your module ID is for it. So if you go into your modules and you see, okay, so this is module ID 6. Then from there, if you go into just pick a random outlet and change the module ID in the URL. So I'm going to go to 6 and 3. So this is so output or module 6 output 3 is going to be test everything. So I have mine set to kick on at 7:45 in the morning. So once everybody's up and no one's going to give me heck for auto testers going off in the night. Now, normally there's an OSC command in here. I was telling it, when to test, how long to be off for. So you can test as many times as you want a day, specific times. Now, my advice is if you are going to change this, keep the ratios the same. Like Paul was saying, in order to test everything, you want it to keep the same ratios. So same thing. And then if you go to your module ID and _4, and this will be for your alkalinity. So I still kept the same ratios, but I just cut it in half for now just to, have 7:45 p.m. is my testing. So that's kind of my caveat with this one.
And feel free to also change the times that they run. We do
Yep.
recommend doing the 4 alkalinity and the 2 calcium, alkalinity, calcium
Mm-hmm.
magnesium a day, and that is to deliver the precision and accuracy that you know and love about the Trident.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that we were incredibly focused on in its development, and what I would recommend to continue to run the 4-2 minimum.
Now, if you run the 4-2 but condense it within, non-sleeping hours, do you think it makes any difference? Like with 6 hour
No,
spacing or 4 hour
I,
spacing or
I don't. I don't think that necessarily doesn't really play into this so much. Like the time, just realize that the reagent sits in the line,
yeah.
right? Like we don't evacuate the lines or anything like that. So generally, it's a test is happening every 6 hours on alkalinity, or a test is happening every 12 hours on calcium magnesium. When you
Mm-hmm.
start to separate, when you start to widen that gap between that test, for example, 24 hours in your
Yeah.
situation, just expect that what will happen is that one of two things will happen. You're going to actually use just the same amount of reagent. So what the Trident does is that we have once we sort of get mired into a system, we sort of know what the value should be based on the normal reagent degradation and all these sorts of different things. We know how many drops that we're shooting for. So if we might pass that, right, because that reagent got stale or something like that. And so then what happens is we actually use more reagent, because now then we have to do a triple test. And in a triple test, that's where we kind of redefine normal. So the
Yeah.
first test of a triple test is a very long test, in which we are going to go drop by drop by drop by drop by drop. Then we're like, okay, we found out where it is. The next test is a fast test, and then we finally, on the third test, we're like, are we sure? Right. Generally, we don't do triple tests because we're always in that range that we think that we should be in. We don't undershoot or overshoot as a result of that, and don't do a triple test.
Yeah. So not the best strategy if you're trying to like make your reagent last longer, but if you want to adjust the schedule and the times when things happen, or, you know, customize certain frequencies, you're like, okay, I want it first thing in the morning, at lunch, and at night, you know, then you have that flexibility-ish to do it.
I do find value too in knowing what your consumption of alkalinity is during non-light hours, right? So one thing that we learned about the Trident is, holy cow, we basically only big surprise, we only calcify when the lights are on, right? But you still drop in alkalinity at night due to pH and CO2 and all these sorts of different issues, right? So all these different factors, and not issues, but factors. So it's important to know what that drop is, and it's why in heavily dominated you know, SPS tanks, right, is why we recommend doing about 70% of your dosing during the day and only 30% at night, right? Because you need more at night, and the baseline that you need during more during the day, and your baseline at night is much less.
That's an interesting one in the chat. Can a Nero be run off the 24-volt port? I just Googled the wattage in Neros, and the Nero 3 takes 20 watts. So technically you could. I don't know if you, a Nero 5 says max 30 watts. So that might be questionable. I don't know if I'd want to push it right at the edge, but a Nero 3, I think you could probably sneak it in there.
You could. You do get a power supply with your Nero, right? I don't think the Nero necessarily needs to be plugged into an energy bar outlet. So what is for me, the value there is probably, I'm not seeing it.
That's fair. Can Neros be controlled with MXMs?
Oh yeah,
I think so. I'm pretty sure they can.
Oh yeah.
All together
now. MXM will control all of your Ecotech and I products, sans the Versa dosing pump.
Now, that was a question in the chat up above. Is there any plans for the Versa to eventually be controlled by it? Maybe. See what happens.
Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe on the board.
Yeah, it's a maybe. Yeah, I think that you know, we do have some MXM improvements coming out shortly, you know, to unlock some of the features that you would expect, you know, particularly from your Vortex sync, anti-sync, which was left out. So you do expect that to be coming up here in the next couple soons.
Nice. I don't really use that one, but I see that question pop up a bit. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so expect that to happen, along with some other exciting stuff that's in the pipeline.
Nice. I don't suppose you can share yet, though.
No, I would love to, but you know.
All right, I'll come back when you can.
Next time you see Paul on here, maybe it'll be for something exciting. Not that this isn't exciting, but
this is good stuff.
One
on briefer. Any news on UK stock on the waves? You guys were moving facilities, weren't you?
Yeah.
Or still are? Or
have I been? I think I've been on since then, and I think I commented on this before. So we have moved all of our manufacturing to our Pennsylvania facility. It's now being manufactured the same place your Radions and your Vortex and your Neros and things like that are being built at. So now it's all being built sort of in that Pennsylvania location. Engineering and a presence in California is definitely still here. I still live in California, for example, and a lot of our engineering team is still in California. I think I've commented before that, you know, our engineering team, you know, it's not just California engineers working on Neptune and Iowa engineers working on aqualuminations and Pennsylvania engineers working on Ecotech, right? It's all of them are working together on our family of brands of products, right? So you've seen several AI products over the last couple of months, you know, Nero 7, the blades, just to name a few, right? And those are all collaborative efforts. months, right?
Nice.
With that being said, I think we've all kind of felt a little bit of the pain of the move, right? Some things have been out of stock, for example. I do, as Pennsylvania becomes more and more online with Neptune Systems products, and as we get all of the raw inventory over, and as the staff there is trained on building Neptune Systems products, which was done in a different way than they normally do for their Ecotech and AI products, right? That staff just becomes more and more online every day, and they're producing more and more products in terms of quantity and in terms of the breadth of products available. So a lot of those out of stocks that you've been seeing, I would expect those things to start changing. You would start seeing those change more and more from out of stock to in stock. Regarding UK inventory in particular, the international market kind of always is the last to be fulfilled, right? But you're going to see BRS start to come online, as well as our other online retailers, and then I would expect that to happen also in the UK as well.
Sounds good. Is there any future potential of adding ends and ors into Neptune programming?
I don't know, Devin. You're a fellow coder. You get a little bit nerdy. I am not a coder, right? Like I do not have a computer science background,
Yep.
and things like that. Do you feel that there's things you can't do because of that?
There's a will, there's a way. Currently, the virtual outlets are your friend, and if you need to do tricky things, you can kind of use virtual outlets as almost like little gates to do stuff. So so Woody, for you, if that one, like virtual outlets really are your friend. Like that's how I use it to check buttons are on, and
and do realize that you can do a lot of, it's all Boolean, right? So I mean, because one thing isn't true, right? That means two other things may not be true, right? So always think of it in the way of, well, what isn't true in this situation too? Last one in wins. Always remember that that's the philosophy of the last thing true is there.
So top down, the very last command takes precedence.
And or ors would make things easier for our programming friends. I don't think it would make it easier for our everyday users. Generally what have we been really focused in on is really finding those things that you need to do with your aquarium and making sure that there's no programming involved with it, right? We have task lists that continues to grow, that continues to take care of your everyday needs, right? And should you want to do more outside of that, I say always start with the task and then modify after that.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of the order of operations definitely does make a difference too, right? Can the flow sensors be calibrated?
No.
There you go.
No. Feel free. I mean, the best way to do it is always do the bucket test. That is going to be your most true version of what is reality there. Do not try to calibrate what your flow is based on how a pump runs, because there are a pump should be producing at a certain head height. Because the thing you aren't taking into consideration are your elbows, your sweep elbows, your diameter of plumbing. All of these different things add up in terms of what the flow should be. So do the bucket test, and generally you'll find that if a flow sensor, let's say for example, you find that it's 100 gallons per hour, and you do the bucket test and you're really 110, well, you're 10% off. Right. And you just need to be able to note that.
Personally, if it's 600 gallons per hour, 800 gallons per hour, I don't really care. I care for the trends. Like, is my flow diminishing? Does it mean my impeller's dirty? I got to clean it. That with most things, I don't even care what the number is. I care about the trends more than the numbers. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and the trends, those trends tell you when action is needed, right? So if you see a trend of a slow flow down, it's likely that that your pump needs to be cleaned. Right, or there is some other blockage in the line somewhere.
So it doesn't matter what it is. Like if it's elk or flow or anything, it's like, what is your normal? And is it rising and falling as expected and within the ranges? And even dosing. Like if my elk, if it was 8.3, 8.5, I don't care. But is it staying there? Is it consistent every day? Or is it lowering over time, or is it raising, right? Do you got to tweak your dosing up or down? Like with a lot of the stuff, that's like what really matters at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Do, do, do.
I mean, Josh there comments out, well, you want to dial in UV sterilizer, what the recommended flow rate is through that. It's absolutely fine, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, do the bucket test with the UV sterilizer,
Yeah.
right? And you know you want to put 200 gallons per hour through that UV sterilizer, for example. Um, Make it match,
Yeah.
right? So you can definitely get there with that.
Well, that's an interesting one, Robert. Sense voltage is a sensor. Can Apex make it available in the code? I know Watts is. Like I've used Watts to trigger stuff. Voltage
There
is
is
an interesting one.
there's reasons, hashtag reasons. I won't get into what the
All right.
reasons are. There are reasons why voltage is not an available probe
Okay.
for you to be able to trigger on.
Yeah. So before the days of power, actually, no, with power money, before the days of MXM modules, I would
Mhm.
use Watts to trigger stuff. Like, for instance, if I had, my Vectra on Mobius, I'd hit feed mode and I'd have the Mobius watch it and say, okay, if it's less than, say, 20 watts, then trigger other stuff. So
Mhm.
that was kind of my hack to make, brands that weren't compatible with Fusion directly to be able to trigger stuff based off of it. Now they are. So
You
obviously
don't
you
need to
don't
worry
need it.
about that
Yeah.
anymore. It all works.
But
So.
that was one of my kind of prior hacks with it.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a good way. I don't really know what you'd want to do with voltage other than like you're having a brownout or something. But yeah,
Voltage is interesting in the brownout. That is the most readily available circumstance that I see, right? And you also, when you have line issues too,
yep.
right? I've seen voltage go up to 130, 135 volts here in the U.S. And that's not something that's something you'd want to be notified about normally,
Yep.
right? So that's the use case for sure. Again, reasons that I have deleted from my mind because
Fair enough.
it wasn't possible.
Yeah,
So,
that's fair enough.
yep.
Woody, I use Watts on my UV. Otherwise, I wouldn't notice it was out. Yeah, I mean that's a great one too, right? To know if your equipment's failed, if your UV is no longer kicking on, you have a heater that fails.
Yeah.
Those are all great uses. Um, have an AC pump that runs slower and the voltage goes down. Want to turn on a booster pump if the voltage goes down. Huh, that's a very niche use case. Interesting. I was wondering what your
Um,
logic was there.
I mean, your voltage should stay fine in line. If your voltage is not staying consistent, you're either overtasking the circuit, right? Or you have some supply issues that you should be able to contact your electric company about.
Another random thought is if you just plug in a UPS to it, it will fill in the gaps of those voltage drops. In theory, right? It'll kick over to batteries if it's assuming it's a short intermittent ones.
And we've talked about if power before. I've
Yep.
talked about if power before. So definitely can do some interesting things with a small battery backup, even to make sure the things that you want on are on. And that's a great time of when the 24-volt port could be utilized, right? Little airstone, little battery airstone or
Yeah.
something like that. Because that 24 volts is going to use a lot less than converting 100 than running 110 volt devices.
Very, very true. I wonder, speaking of battery backups, I have a plethora of batteries on my floor right now.
I'm aware you went the lithium route last year, right?
Yeah, I did. I just got a new
Yeah.
one too, little 50
Oh,
amp
look
hour
at
one.
that! Yeah, yeah,
It's cute.
yeah, yeah.
And then
It's cute.
a 100 amp hour one. So I'm starting to play with making some, like using voltage boosters to, see if I can do like a Nero battery backup and other stuff.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
more little projects. Maybe we'll do a video on that
Yeah,
for next week.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of UPSs are like power conditioners. 100% on that one. Should I ask about DST?
I I
Daylight
already
savings time?
I already commented about DST today. I said we almost got it right.
Okay.
Um, so it's something that it's complicated, and your half-hour time zones in Australia, and
Mhm.
you know the world moving to daylight savings time, different parts of the world.
Yep.
It's complicated. But for a lot of our customers this year, no problem. So
You
there
know,
were definitely people that did have issues though.
on that note, I didn't actually realize that different time zones transition to their daylight savings at different times of the month. Because
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, someone's like, "You're streaming early." I'm like, "No, it's normal time." But then I realized we just had daylight savings time, and East Coast
Yep.
hadn't caught up with
Mhm.
that yet. It's a couple weeks later, but
Yeah. It's on some of my gaming rooms and things like that that I get into, right? It gets super confusing when you're in an international group and
yep.
you're trying to be like everyone's going to be online at this time, and
Which time zone?
wait, what is it? And so it's very frustrating.
Yep. Um, Robert, yeah, ask your question again about revisit the question about running between the dose cycles. Yeah, ask that question again because I'm not quite sure what the context was. Um,
You can turn it off, Michael. Feel free
how
to turn off, and
how do we
uh,
turn it off? Let's look.
can do that in the local
Oh,
interface, I believe, and I think you can even do that in
and
Fusion.
fusion. Boom,
Uh,
right here
yeah, just go there.
to the clock.
Yeah.
Auto clock set. Daylight saving times.
Well, look
Boom,
at those.
boom. Apply. Done.
What do you like the new? Do you like the new switches? By the way,
They're very lovely.
this was a new Fusion update. Small quality of life improvements. We're all about those.
Yep,
So,
I like
um,
it.
most people, I would always recommend you keep auto clock going. Daylight savings time, if for some reason it's burning you, make sure that you can turn it off there.
Yep. Michael, thanks for $5 super chat. But there you go, guy, buddy. Clock, and then in there, just enable or disable it to your heart's content. Done. See, just that easy. Any battery backup options for the core, like the Vectra? Can the Ecotech batteries be used? The core, no, because the Ecotech's in the driver specific, where the cores are powered off the Apex
Yeah.
mainly. Depends on the size, but
So you can only use, well, you could, if you put your whole EB832 on a battery backup, you could do that. But the Core
Mhm.
20 is really the only one that will really hit the battery backup need for you.
Yeah. So on that note, this is on the Apex head units. There is a little 12-volt port, and you can plug that into a wall and have it detect when there's a power outage. So maybe I'll do a video on this one day. But if you wanted, you could plug your whole EB832 into a UPS, and you could have your head unit plugged into the wall, and you can detect when the power goes out and have it turn off certain outlets, so only your critical stuff stays on, so your
And
UPS runs longer. So that's you can do some cool stuff like that as well.
generally, though, unless you are like Devin and you have a bank of lithium batteries at your disposal, I don't recommend running things like return pumps.
Mm-hmm.
So
Our
what do you
lights.
do? What do you do in that situation? Well, first off, if you're in a storm situation and you don't know how long power is going to be out, and let's say it's very cold where you are, make sure you have some styrofoam ready. Okay. Wrap the tank in styrofoam. It actually does work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then only keep water movement up in the tank. Now you say, well, what about my refugium? That's
Doesn't matter.
fine. It will come back. But if you want to try to keep that going as well, and you're not dealing with incredibly cold situations,
Mm-hmm.
um, just have a small little pump also, down there, like it's going to consume 20-30 watts of power, right?
Yep.
And just have that running down in your sump, right? Keep that bacteria alive and everything, so it keeps on running. And then once, let's say power's been out for 2 or 3 days, right? And you've been in this situation, don't turn on your return pump, right? Like get everything right. Check
Mm-hmm.
your ammonia levels down in your sump before you turn them on in your aquarium and vice versa, right?
Yep.
It's likely your ammonia did peak. Your fish don't need to eat. Don't feed them. Okay. And during that time,
Yep.
everything will be okay. After 3 days, you know, I'll be
Yep.
thinking of you, and I hope things go well.
Yeah.
So,
So in general, the only thing I would really worry about running off battery backup is a power head. Like I
yes.
have both my MP60s in my water box, and then in my lagoon beside me, what do I have? I don't know, two or three. I think I only run two out of the four. But just
Yeah.
flow in the tank to keep your fish and core alive is key. So that's all I'd really worry about in that. I mean, on the Vortex, they have a plug, but I'm saying that if you had different pumps running on an Apex, you could do that and then tell everything that's not a power head to shut off to
Mm-hmm.
give you more flow. It's like it's a workaround for, different voltage pumps. But
Yes, I totally think that. I agree with Devin. An air pump is never a bad idea to
Mm,
bubble in air directly as well.
yep.
You're losing a lot of turnover by not going down to your sump, right?
Mm,
And it's that oxygen as it decreases is really what starts to make that ammonia nitrates toxic,
yep.
right? So if you can keep the oxygen content high up there, that's where you want to be.
Yep. Sammy D, I just bought a tank breakdown. It has a Trident, etc. How do I remove the old user? I think you probably have to factory reset it in that case, I'm assuming.
If the old user was involved, they could delete their Fusion account and things would be very well, and it would be fine.
Mm,
But the best thing to do is just to factory reset it, hold that reset button until it turns red, and it will be fresh for you. Fresh, quote unquote. On the Trident, it's likely clogged. And if you don't shut down the Trident appropriately and drain it appropriately, it will clog. If you're a hands-on person, go ahead and get the DIY kit and watch the DIY video. If you're not a hands-on person, send it off to Neptune Systems. You have two options there: an advanced replacement, where we'll send you another one, and you return that one. Give us the core,
yep.
or you can send that one in. We reservice it. It's a flat $200 fee or a flat $145 fee. So don't throw away the Trident.
Nope. There you go. And I will probably do a video on the DIY version as well as I do mine in the near future.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get those kits? Got
No,
them?
not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I'll
Yep.
double check on that for you.
Okay. Much appreciated. Okay,
Yeah.
Robert, I have a dose scheduled and set up for auto water change. Looking at the advanced tabs, I see the table data. Can you explain that data? I would like to have another dose run between auto water change cycles. Yeah, so I know what data you're talking about. It's like a bunch of random numbers. It's scheduling, but yeah, I don't know how to explain that.
So the table data, it's not to be interfaced by customers or anything like that. I couldn't possibly tell you what numbers to change there to do what. But if you want to put another one in between whatever you're doing for some reason, just create that single one.
Mm,
Okay, and whatever schedule, however you would normally want that to happen. I don't know why you wouldn't include that just in your normal programming or whatever. And each one of those T data points has a time associated with it. Okay,
mhm.
and so it'll tell it how fast to run, how much to run, how long to run, all of these different things.
Okay.
So you take that T data and then you would just copy and paste that and put it in between the other ones. Again, I don't know why you wouldn't just build this in the schedule normally,
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
that is something you could do. Or just change numbers and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. Just use the regular schedule. If I, look at mine, same thing. If it's auto water change, like this is dosing obviously, but you
Yeah.
could just add more points and tell it to do whatever you wanted.
And go ahead
And
and
I
hit the line buttons there. So right next to the outlet
uh,
button in the top left. Nope,
oh,
nope, 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 nope. Over, 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 over. Other side, other side,
oh,
other
that's what you're
side.
talking
Yeah,
about.
hit this.
Ah,
So that is what he's talking about there.
yep.
Okay. So what that is one dose at 21 milliliters and 21 milliliters per minute or something like that. I don't
Mm,
know. But you would just basically put another T data point in between there if you
yep.
wanted to. Don't
So
recommend doing this.
yeah, if you really wanted to figure it out, I bet you could look at when stuff was dosed and then reference the times and the quantities to the table and figure it out. But yeah, I agree. Just use the regular schedule. Save
Yes.
yourself the hassle.
Yes, and then there's stuff like them. Even in that T data, that's where the Trident controlled dosing stuff is also saved,
Hmm.
right? So it's you change one of those values, and now it's looking for what your alkalinity level is and all that
Yep.
sort of stuff. So
Okay. Woody's gamer tag. My Trident is working great, but it's a year old. Do I need to do something to maintain it? Well, year and a half ish is the recommended maintenance
yep,
interval.
yep, anywhere from 18 to 36 months,
Yep.
is when it is, and you can do preventative. Like,
Hmm.
so what do you see when your Trident starts, when it's telling you, more or less, you start to see a big jump between the calcium alkal, so the three triple test, so
Hmm.
alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, and just the pure alkalinity. When you
Yep.
start seeing like, oh, here's this, and then here's this, and you're starting to see that change in between the triple test versus the other one,
Yep.
that's indicative that things probably start to need it. It
Hmm.
is preventative, so you can kind of do it at any point you want. The kit's only $75. If you're hands-on,
Hmm.
feel free to hit it. The video that I made, I may say so myself, was I think
It
it
was
was
good.
really
I watched
great.
it.
and people are successful with it as long as they follow the instructions.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, no, it was a good video. I watched it actually a few weeks ago.
Cool.
So yeah, so my original Trident is starting to hit that, and it's been pushing 2 years since I originally had it, and it started to be the values are a bit off, and I'm like, okay, it's time to maintain it. I'm past that point. So, but I've also messed with my schedule and don't test, to the norm what you're supposed to. So I mean, part of it's self-inflicted. It just goes to say, 2 and a bit years later, then okay, I should probably do that now.
Exactly.
So it all depends, right?
Words right out of my mouth, Devin. Thank you.
I know. Happy to help. I think 3-ish mark is when you want to refresh it. Yeah, so year and a half is a general recommendation. Could be a year and a half, could be 2 years, could be 3 years. You could be proactive and do it at that year and a half, 2 years mark before you get any wonky results. But yeah, if you're starting to see like the calcium L, like bigger swings or just not as consistent, your dosing could be buggered, or it could be, starting to be that point where you should refresh it, get new tubing, go through all the maintenance on it. The sample waterline filter is a nice addition recently. Keeping more junk out of it's definitely a good way to go.
So we added the sample line filter, I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's included with every DIY kit and every service now.
Nice.
So you can purchase it on our parts store, is not a retail product. So something that we put out in the retailer chain and things like that. So
can I use a solar battery charger as a backup? A solar battery charger. You can use solar to charge a battery. I don't know if you could power directly off of it. It really depends on the output and stuff as it. Then your stuff would only run during daylight hours if you meet the wattage need.
A solar battery, right? It's just the battery is going to charge based on the solar. When the battery is exhausted and there's no more energy, i.e., solar energy, then you're at the end of your rope. So
yeah, so if you're hardcore, I mean, if you could have solar that charges the battery and run yourself off your battery, you're going to be a pretty sweet setup for long-term power outages. But again, that's a little more involved to have all that set up and ready to roll. I've done it on one tank. I'd recommend it, but
yeah.
All right, Paul, we're just about at an hour, so I won't keep you too much longer. But if there's any burning questions that we didn't get to or any hacks you guys want to share, let us know.
I will do some promotion right at the moment. So we are at a trade show this weekend or this week.
Nice.
Down in Orlando, Global Pet Expo. It's a little bit more of a industry show, right? So more for distributors, and it is a full pet show. But you can see the Aperture folks there down there. But the next reef show, Reefapalooza, is down in Orlando. It's going to be in the end of April. If you want to go to a great show that has lots of coral, the ability to talk to people in the industry, manufacturers and things like that, definitely be there, right?
That's one of my favorites.
Yes. And Reefapalooza Orlando is probably the coup d'etat because you get to go to Orlando, go to Worldwide, Top Shelf, all those kind of meccas of coral and things like that. And you get to go to a full show in which you get speakers and yada, yada, yada. So we will be there, all of our brands, right? So Neptune, AI, Ecotech, Hello Reef, a newly launched brand, Aqua Ready, which is more designed for not beginners per se, but getting the job done. Right. So
I've not heard of that one yet. Nice.
You'll see some Aquamax products that you probably know and love in there, and you'll see some new products and things like that. So we will be at Reefapalooza at the end of April. And I do strongly recommend that if you are at all interested in doing that sort of thing or want to get more involved in the hobby, hit those things for sure.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite of the batch too. Like, Florida is a nice time of year. It's beautiful down there. There's tons of cool stuff to do. So it's a good time. Robert, thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated.
Booyah.
Booyah. Sammy 31D, Neptune Sky Jr., please. With my OG Skies. Would love something for smaller tanks. Any thoughts around that?
I don't know. For small tanks, we have a lot of good solution in our brands of products. We have the Prime, we have the XR15, we have the 32, we have the blades. The blades are so very much like a Sky. And they hit a really nice note in terms of the price.
Mhm.
I really love those lights myself for
Yeah,
small things.
I do too. They're pretty cool lights.
They're really they took a lot of the things that the Sky did and put them in a much smaller package, which I
Mm.
really liked.
Yep. No, definitely. All right, Paul. Thank you for coming on today. Definitely
Yeah,
appreciate it. We will, I don't know, have to do this a little more frequently of some,
yeah. I want to be. I'll hopefully have some new products to talk about soon, right? So hopefully you'll have me on here soon, but
Okay.
maybe not. We'll see.
All right. Well, let me know when they're close to official, then we'll line something up.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks everybody for hanging out tonight. Much appreciated. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed as always, hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Catch you guys on the next live stream.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.